Hi, everybody. It's Marion Roach Smith from the Memoir Project, and welcome to Graphic Memoir. Me, maybe, here's how with Elizabeth Trembley. And I'm really excited that you're here today. We're going to be together for about an hour. This is part of my Let Me Introduce You series where I introduce you to people I think you should know. And it's just fun as hell for me to do this. So I hope you can sit back and relax. This is being recorded. You will get a recording tomorrow, 24 hours after we get off the call. So whatever your time zone equivalent is of 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time is when your recording will come. It's also going to be made available on my YouTube channel, which is Marion Roach Smith. And so just share the love when you, when you get it. Give people the YouTube link and let them see it, because I think we've got a great program today. So I think that's all you need to know. The recording is going out. We will take questions at the end. So let me ask you this, those of you who are here with us right now, just tell me that you can hear my voice and see the screen, and do so if you would in the questions box. It's really helpful to me to know that the tech is getting through. So find the questions box on your GoToWebinar. Okay, Christine, Peg, fabulous. Oh, look at all these familiar names. That's so wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you for coming along today. I'm delighted you're here. And this is live, so I'm not going to push a button and leave the room, which also means my dog will walk in and start barking. But I'm going to introduce me. I'm Marion Roach Smith from the Memoir Project. I'm the author of 4 books with 4 of the biggest publishers in the world. And I am the person who started the Memoir Project and run the Memoir Project and teach at the Memoir Project here online at marionroach.com. Today, I am joined by Elizabeth Trembley, who she gave me permission to call her Beth, which I think is wonderful. Hi, Beth. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you. So happy to be here.
Well, I'm delighted you're here. And Beth is a graphic memoirist, and her debut graphic memoir, Look Again, published by Street Noise, was a finalist for the Graphic Medicine International Collective Award. And she's a Lambda Literary Award-winning mystery writer. Her pen name is Josie Gordon, and a skilled teacher and coach to creators. And she works in prose and in comics. And she teaches these wonderful workshops and classes that we're going to talk more about at Sequential Artists Workshop. And they're 4 and 12-week courses. She leads online and in-person workshops for small groups and community organizations. She coaches individuals. She works with small groups. She works with larger groups. And I'm going to give you all of her stats in a few minutes, but you can see her images on Instagram at Elizabeth_Trembley. And we're going to jump right in. So Beth, it's really wonderful to have you here. And I want to just start off by giving people context for this breathtaking book of yours that I read that changed everything I thought about graphic memoir. And so I'll just set it up for people, and then I'd like you to kind of give them the story. You, years ago, you were out walking your dog in the woods and you came upon a dead body.
That is
And
right.
you talk about trauma can make truth hard to find. So I'll let everybody read the copy here on the page, but why don't you talk to us? Why don't you set this up for us? Tell us when, tell us what you saw, tell us what you thought, and we're going to then talk more about that so people can start to understand what you did. So go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm a big dog person and a big woods walker, and every single day I go to a park or the woods somewhere, generally in the off hours, early in the morning, so I could let my dogs run free, which is completely against the law, but I do it when nobody else is out there, right? That's my whole goal. And this was in the 90s, and I was out right one November morning, immediately after sunrise. And I had not walked very far from my car, a couple hundred yards maybe. And what happened to me was I froze. And just like you've read about, all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I remember thinking, what's happening? I had no idea why I had frozen. And then I got tunnel vision, absolutely black. I was frozen standing, and then I saw a shoe with a foot in it against the trunk of a tree. That's literally how tiny my tunnel vision was. And then it slowly expanded, and maybe a trigger warning here, I don't know, but I did see a man who was hanging from a tree, but in an extremely unusual position. And the position he was in and the distance he was from the ground, which was only about a foot, led me to believe instantaneously that I had interrupted a murder. I knew he hadn't been there the night before because I had been there the night before, just before sundown. And I became immediately terrorized that I was going to be next.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of lost it. I mean, it depends on how you think about it, but I could not turn around and go back to my car, even though it was not that far, because I believed in my core that if I turned around, they would know I had seen, and then they would come after me.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept walking deeper into the woods,
Mm.
even though I knew, because I knew those woods very well, that the shortest way for me to do a circle and come back to my car was going to be 2 miles. And I just tried to walk as if I had seen nothing.
Mm.
Yeah, until I was out of sight of the tree, and then I reasoned that I could run, and then I ran.
Mm. So over the years, you told yourself many versions of this story, apparently. You
Yeah.
told this story, and well, let's just stay with this for a minute. Well, you told this story to yourself, to many people, to in your own mind. And it was how many years later that you started to work on the book?
Well, it's worth noting that it was only about 10 years later, so in the early 2000s, that I actually wrote a prose memoir about this, a short, very short, not a book, but it was an essay. And that was long before I decided to work in comics. So about 10 years after, I wrote a prose piece. And then this happened, I think, I can never remember the day, which is one of the things I talk about in the book. But it was in November, and I think it was 96. Yes, it was. And I started working on the graphic memoir in 2017.
Okay. So what we know, what I want to set up for everybody when we're going to go back into the book in a minute, is that you teach and you've got 2 instructional manuals out how to do this. And I'm going to give the contact for how to get in touch with how to get these. But you're a senior instructor and author of that book, but you're also you've been trained in literature, writing, innovation, and creativity, and in places as diverse as the University of Chicago, Disney University, the Sequential Arts Workshop, and you teach online classes in graphic memoir, story structure, and project management. So you run these workshops for people of all groups. So when Beth and I are talking, you're going to hear what sounds like a teacher too. And I think that's a really important reason why I called her, is because not only did she write this book, but she teaches this form. So who have we got on the call today? We've probably got people who want to write memoir, because that's what I teach and that's why you come to these things. You might maybe you're someone who draws or wants to include graphic material, and we're going to talk about that too, that what can you put in memoir. So I don't want anyone to feel like, oh my goodness, I'm in the wrong place, because it could be any form of artistic expression, I think. And you're someone who needs to know how and when to begin a graphic memoir. So that's what we're going to pretty much try to cover today. But I think what's really important is that Beth, why don't you give us a definition of graphic memoir, and then we'll go back to your book and break it down a little bit so people can get a sense of how this story really formed for you, and how, of course, not everyone writing memoir has to have a trauma like yours, but you
No,
make,
right.
yeah, and we'll talk all about that. So don't worry about that, people. You don't have to have discovered a murder to write graphic memoir. But why don't you set us up with a good definition of graphic memoir, Beth?
All righty. Well, graphic memoir means, first of all, memoir. And I imagine most folks on this call know exactly what that is, and that's why they're here, although we can dig more into that a bit later, and that it's graphic. And what that means is that the medium that we are using for our memoir creation is comics. So as opposed to prose, which is a medium, or film, which is a medium, comics is actually considered a medium. And most of us know what comics look like. And while, yes, there can be single panel cartoons that we're all familiar with, basically in storytelling or in narrative of any kind, the idea with comics is that it's multiple images in sequence.
Mhm.
Again, we're all pretty familiar with what that looks like. Words combined with pictures. And we get them on panel to panel. That's what the little boxes are called, panels or frames across pages. And they can be short or long, but that's basically what it means, is memoir told in the medium of comics.
Great. And that works for me. I think we can really relate to it, but it's not a picture book. I mean, it's not a
Right.
children's picture book. And I think that's an important distinction. And while you can have 6 or 4, 1 panels per page, predominantly, we know, all of us knows what that comics layout is because it's sequential. So when you were starting out with this beautiful book, your goal, and I have read several interviews with you, and you talk about how you sat down to write a middle grade adventure tale, and I always refer to this with the writers I work with as a roll away the stone moment, where some story
Right.
goes, not so fast. You're going to have to process this story first. And this is a very real thing that happens to writers. It's happened to me. It happened to me when a friend of mine committed suicide, and I was on a book deadline, literally. And that book just came to a crashing halt until I wrote about Susanna and our relationship. I've never published it. I just needed to write about it. So
Mm.
I get that. We all
Mhm.
have that story. And you apparently realized quite quickly that you had told multiple versions of this tale over the years. So how did you use that reality as you sat down and shifted from the middle grade adventure tales that you thought you were going to write to this graphic memoir?
Yeah, so you described it so beautifully that so often as creators, even with memoir, which you kind of think because you're writing about your own past, the subconscious takes over. This sometimes our better selves has other plans for us, and so I was completely devoted to writing some middle grade adventures. I was going to write about a space person and a German Shepherd dog, and one day, truly without thinking about it, I sketched what I had seen that morning in the woods. Now this is
Mm.
2017, so almost 20 years later, right? Um, and I had not been thinking about it that I knew of anyways, and outrolled this sketchbook image. And I can remember my heart starting to race because I was looking for the first time at this image that I had seen, you know, for a split second in 1996. And although it had been in my head since, it had never been outside of my head
Mm.
since. And it's incredibly hard to articulate, but I think it's so important in terms of for anyone who's thinking about working in images or comics in particular, because I became a witness of a different kind in that moment. Um, I mean, I had witnessed what I had witnessed, but now I was seeing it again and differently. I was getting out of my head what had been swirling around in my head, what I could try to tell people about, but could never really articulate very well. And I closed my sketchbook and didn't touch it for months
Mm.
because not because it was bad. I did not feel re-traumatized. I just was so energized and slightly surprised that I didn't know what to do with that. And then that fall, a couple months later, I came back to it and thought, okay, now what? And I'm telling the story in detail. I'm just going to veer off a second and I'll come right back because I
Mhm.
actually think this is one of the top tips I would give. And I know we're coming to that later, but I want to mention it quick
Yeah.
to someone
No,
who's
please.
thinking about starting, which
Mhm.
is odds are you've got hot images in your head. Um, it's something that you see. It doesn't have to be scary like mine was. Something that you see or that you can can conjure up, and drawing that can create already a whole different sense of your relationship with what's happening because it comes out of your head in a visual way.
Mm.
And then you draw the image of what happened right before and what happened right after and just expand from there. And that's what I began to do. And then I thought, to come back to your questions about how I used this, I thought to myself, oh, well, this will be good. I've written about it, right? I'd already written that prose essay. I know this story cold. This will be a great way for me to learn comics because I had just begun in 2017. I was 54 years old. I wanted to start working in comics because I'd always loved them. Here's a story I already know. I'm going to be able to focus on the medium, increase my comics chops by working on a story that I've got cold because I've been telling it for 20 years. And my relationship with that story changed so profoundly, so quickly because of the images and the way our brains work, which is totally different when we draw than when we work in prose. Um, I can remember the moment where I realized that all these memories that were coming back to me were not all part of the same story. Like I
Mm,
didn't know that, Marion, when I started.
mm,
And I thought I had one story and I just needed to get it down. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I told that story then, but that doesn't match with the version of the story I told later. And I tried to stuff them all into the same version. And I remember so vividly the day that it kind of exploded in front of me that really I had multiple versions. I actually kind of put my head down on the desk and cried,
mhm, mhm.
which I think many of us do in the point of writing memoir. And I emailed my friend and mentor, Tom Hart, who's a great graphic memoirist. And I said, I can't do it. There's too many stories. I can't do it. And he said, yes, you can. And he sent me this beautiful, beautiful email in which he said, I think you're not writing a graphic memoir as much as rewiring your consciousness.
Oh,
And in doing so, you are preparing yourself to help others.
oh,
I wrote that down. I was able to just read it to you because I have
yep.
it stuck on the wall, and that calmed me down as good mentors do. And I was not sure I could do it. And I
And,
just thought, okay, one at a time.
yeah. And that's fantastically generous of him and
Yeah.
fantastically interesting of your brain. But you weren't thwarted by the six different the multiple different versions of this tale that you had told and that you had in your head. And for some people they might be saying, "What? I don't get it. There's just one truth. There's one single truth and I'm going to get
Ah,
to it." There isn't. If you
right.
don't believe me, call your sister. I was at a dinner party recently and told a story that I thought was hilarious. Everybody laughed. It was a story including my sister. It was a story about our childhood. She waited till the laughter died down and then she said, "That never happened."
Oh,
And she doesn't remember it, is what is the truth. I remember it. Which one is true?
right.
So there are so many versions of the same story depending on where you're looking at. And you can tell a story from so many different points of view. So you didn't let this eventually with Tom's help, getting you going again. You didn't let this stop you. In fact, you utilized it in the tale, the different versions.
Right.
How did you make that decision?
Well, I decided that I needed to just let it roll. And
Yep.
I am an iterative writer. It's not always the most efficient, but for me, it's the best way to get at the good stuff. And so I just thought I'm going to gather what I can gather. I'm going to let it be what it needs to be in my earliest drafts, and I'll deal with it later. And letting those things come out and saying, oh, that's in this version, that's in this version, helped me very quickly realize that the versions changed because of revelations. When there was version number one, and then I found out something that it was not a murder, but it was a suicide. That changed how I talked about it. Then I got some very interesting advice, well-meant advice from my father, but that I didn't take as well as perhaps I should have. That changed how I thought about it, how I told it. Um, I was challenged by a friend, this is years later, to think more about the person who I had found and what it means to find someone. There's actually a term for people who find dead bodies. It's a particular sort of experience. We humans handle that in a particular sort of way. I did a lot of research about that, and that changed the version I told. So there were always these revelations, often that came from other people, that caused me, I didn't know this at the time, but over time had been causing me to change my versions. And once I
Yeah.
realized that, I knew I had the turning points to a story structure.
There you go. That's beautiful and so well put. So
Thanks.
I've taught a lot of people to write memoir. You've taught a lot of
Yeah,
people to write memoir.
yeah.
What does the graphic element do for a story that might not have happened in a purely narrative telling of the tale? You covered this a little bit in your intro comments, but as this particular story that we now know changed, had
Mm.
different versions as information came in. So what happens? What is the benefit to the storytelling, to the storyteller, to the viewer? What, from any point of view, what does the graphic element, what do the graphic elements do that couldn't happen in a purely narrative telling of the tale?
Yeah. So I'm so glad you asked this because I think there are two answers that I really want to highlight. The first one is, even if you've got listeners out there right now who are thinking, well, I'm interested in these things, I read them, but I could never do this. This is not my
Mm,
bag. I don't even want to. Working in comics as part of your creation process, as part of your drafting, has enormous benefit, even if you intend to write in prose. And I think that's really important for people to hear because I really honestly believe at my core that working in comics can benefit anyone telling any kind of story or frankly even conveying information. So that's number one. And then number two, of course, is what if you do want to produce comics and share those with the world? So I think comics, first of all, depending on your age, and I'm of an age, I'm over 60 now, you probably or might have grown up with this particular American concept that comics are subliterate, that only people who can't uh, read comics, that it's a lower form of literature and literacy. And we could talk for an hour about historically why that happened. Only in the United States and a little bit in the United Kingdom. Did not happen in Europe or in Asia in the same way. And so they have been developing graphic literature as literature really quite longer than we have, and we have again kind of this particular bias against it, and I really want to encourage people to explore more about why that isn't there. In fact, comics has a more advanced literacy requirement than just prose does. So I just like to disabuse everybody of the notion up front that working in comics is somehow lesser than. uh, it's
good.
important. Comics actually has more tools for communication than just prose. Audiences of comics both read and look, and therefore we can use things like body language, uh, the many visual languages that our culture saturated in,
Mm,
phones, podcasts, videos, all the screen time that we spend, we are actually more inundated as a culture with visual imagery and connections than many people are in prose anymore. And so it's really worth exploring that. A
mhm.
creator's voice, we talk about voice all the time, right? With prose, your voice in comics is your line and the way you see the world and translate the world. And so the great news is you don't have to draw very well to make impactful comics.
Yeah.
Um, you have to be able to draw clearly enough that people can tell what it is you're drawing. But it doesn't have to look like anybody else's drawing. In fact, it shouldn't, because those drawings are your voice. Um, Comics provides a really unique feedback loop, especially for memoirists. It's kind of what I was talking about a second ago. You can write the word, um, tea kettle, but when you draw the tea kettle and the steam coming out of it and the color and the shape and maybe the oven it was on and maybe behind it, in one image, you are giving to your reader way more information than you could do in just a couple of words. It would take many more words to get across the kinds of things that you want to get out there in visual images.
Hmm.
But in particular, there's a lot of, I guess I want to say, neuroscience that talks about how the brain works around images. And for memoirists, drawing is going to get into your brain and cause you to think of things you would not have thought of before. It
Ah,
is not generally verbal. right? It's encoded in our brain in different ways. And once we get away from the verbal encoding in our heads, then we lose, in good ways, chronology and logic. And so these beautiful connections will start to show up. You think you're writing about the time you got your first puppy, and the next thing you know, you're drawing a picture of your mother going off to work, as a computer programmer in 1967. And you're like, how did that even just happen? Right. So it's amazing what you discover as a
Yeah.
creator when you start drawing. That would be the number one reason I think people should work in comics.
Ah, that's such a good answer. And I so appreciate the depth of it because I encourage people to do this all the time. So you have these two guides to how to
Mm,
do this. And from the first one, and I'll go back and show everybody the covers and show you how to get them and all of that. But from the first one, you have this wonderful point. You say that with memoir, readers really get two stories, the one from your past and the story of how you made meaning from it. I just can't thank you enough. My work is now done here because I always say to people, memoir is not about what you did. Memoir is about what you did with
with
it.
it.
And
Yes.
that's what you're saying, the
Mhm.
making meaning. I have students, people that I've worked with, colleagues I've worked with who say that they're living differently because they're writing memoir, the
Yeah.
clarity that it's brought to their lives, the narrative arc, the things that they didn't see as connected that they now see as connected. So talk to me a bit about this assurance you have about making meaning.
So I really do believe that, at least in comics and probably in prose, the story you set out thinking you're going to tell when you begin a memoir is not the story you end up writing.
Yeah,
Because,
that's
right?
true.
It happens, I mean, every time. I honestly do not think I have had a single student for whom that is not true. And
Mm,
I think that is because when we begin to write about or make comics about, create about the story from our past, we embark on the story of making meaning from it. Right. So, I mean, maybe it's something that happened in, let's just say, the early 2000s, and we've made meaning from it between then and now. But we're making a whole different level of meaning from it as we create it, as we craft this piece, whether it's prose, comics, long or short, that's telling the story from the past and what we've done with it. We are also creating another level of meaning making because we're crafting it to be understood by somebody else.
yes.
Right. And we want to be read, and we want to be read by people who have lots of other things they could choose to do with their time. And so I think why readers come to memoir is not just to read the story of what happened to you in your past, but I mean, the times we live in, right? I
Yeah.
think one of the things that people most crave, is this notion that who they are matters, that
Hmm.
how they are in the world matters.
Hmm.
What can I do in the world to leave goodness behind me? I think almost everyone wants that. How do I how do I look at this, what can feel like a cacophony or a chaos of experience and input and good and bad things that have happened to me, and understand it, and so that I can pass that understanding on. I mean, that's, again, most people want to do that with their children, spouses, friends.
Hmm.
We want to share our wisdoms. That's the unique generosity, the unique gifts we have to give to the world. And so I think people come to read memoir to see, Marion, in your memoir, what did you do,
Hmm.
to move, not just have that thing happen to you, but to have it become meaningful, because your experience, that second story, is what's going to help me model. It's going to be a model for me of how
Yes.
I can think about my own experiences, even if our experiences are completely not the same. Like, I'm not going to go
Absolutely.
hiking some huge, long, multi-thousand-mile trail,
No.
but but my own endurance thing that I have to endure, right, might be totally different. But learning about how that person made meaning from the endurance is going to help me.
That's exactly it. I couldn't agree with you more. That's beautifully put. So, what are some of the tips you have for people that are starting out? What should they do? You touched on it a bit. You talked about your own experience. You sat down to do one thing and something else popped into your head and you went with it. But when it was apparent to you that there were different versions of it?
Hmm.
You turned to it. You called, what do they say then? You called for you called a lifeline. I can't remember
Yeah,
that old phrase
yeah,
from a TV show. You put out a call and you got some help. And so, where to start? Do you start by sketching and seeing what comes up? Do you start by writing some words and seeing what comes up in the graphic aspect? Do you gather some images? I mean, there's so many ways to look at this. And again, I want to reiterate that it doesn't have to be a bummer. Memoir is not a bummer genre. It's a genre that allows for this. What did you do with it? But so, where would you suggest all of these people listening in go first?
great. Also, I'll just say the memoir I'm working on now, the graphic memoir I'm working on now, is about my three most favorite childhood stories and how they've impacted me as an adult. So
Uh,
this memoir is all joy, all
mm,
joy.
Good
And
for
so,
you.
yeah, I just wanted to say that to underscore your point. Okay, so if you're out there and you're thinking, oh, I would like to try this, or you're thinking, oh, I wish I could, but I never could because, and most people think they could never do this because they believe they can't draw. So we talked about that a minute ago, but that would be my actual number one tip. Let that go. Um, if you really believe you can't draw and you want a little bit of encouragement or a little bit more security to get yourself doing this, I would recommend that you look at children's drawing books. In particular, the Ed Emberley books, which many of us had as little kids, where he teaches you how to just use shapes like triangles and squares and lines and dots to build drawings. That's good enough. But there's a lot of excellent drawing material out there, but look at children's stuff because it's clear, it's clean, it's simple. And I think almost everyone can learn to draw simply, and that's enough to make good graphic memoir. So I just like to say that right off the bat. But what I think the next thing to do would be exactly what you just said. There's a million ways to start, but I think a good way to start is to get yourself a giant stack of 3x5 cards. I like them because they're cheap. And make what I like to call memory cards, which is think about some of the images you have. I sketch them again very simply with pen, so I don't fuss, right? I can't erase and fuss on one side. And then I flip the card over and make any sort of notes I need to about that. So in my case, I'm working on this memoir, and I'm thinking about my grandmother's living room. And I have some photographs, but I'm trying to remember what I remember. And I remember the couch and the rocking chair. So these are bits that I'm drawing. I remember her making Jiffy Pop popcorn on the stove. And this is something I've drawn, and then I flip it over and I write other things. And I collect these and I throw them in a box. I always have two boxes. I know it's a project when I have a box.
Ah,
And yeah, I have a physical box into which I throw 3x5 cards, anything else I find or print out or cut out. And I have a digital box where I work a lot on my iPad, so where I can put digital images, things I find online, notes, anything, so that I can collect stuff. I'm a big collector of stuff. But now you want to make some comics. You've collected some images. Grab an image, put an actor in it, a person, yourself, your mom, whoever, more than one is fine, and just sketch it again on a 3x5 card. Have a look, and then ask yourself what happened immediately before that. Draw that on a different 3x5 card. Now go back to that core image. Ask yourself what happened immediately after that. Draw that on a different 3x5 card. And just build that image out, one before, one after, until something kind of hooks you and you want to go in a particular direction. If you screw up, that's okay. 3x5 cards are cheap. Toss it. I often dramatically toss them. I like a little drama, and so I toss them dramatically over my shoulder. Pshaw, I say, and I redraw. And I have to keep it fun. What can I,
I think we
And
need to get that up on YouTube. Pshaw.
pshaw. But the idea is that you're practicing sequencing, the
Yes.
juxtaposition moment to moment to moment. And then you're just playing. It's 3x5 cards. You can decide later what might fit or not fit into a into a comic that becomes part of your memoir. But it also might be that it does not become part of your memoir, but you look down and now you've remembered things that you didn't remember because you were playing with images, and it will change your prose memoir because you did it. The other thing that I tell people, I practice this all the time with my students, is something called the fast draft. Again, I use index cards because they're inexpensive and easy to get. And I draft, once I have a sense of what I'm doing, I've done enough collecting that I'm ready. I try to draft myself from start to finish as fast as possible. Now, that might mean, in the case of a book, it might mean a month. Or if it's something shorter, it might just mean a couple of hours. But I use 3x5 cards, very rough sketches. What do I think is going to happen next? What do I think is going to happen next? Paying zero attention to the art. Just getting images down, just thinking about the structure on the page. With comics, if you're doing something that's longer, you always think about the page turn, right? The spatial impact in comics of the page turn is imperative. You always need to think about what's the last thing that's going to cause your reader to turn the page in ways that you never think about in prose. And just because I need to make a mess, I need to do, I think you call it, we hear other people call it a vomit draft, get it all out, I'll fix it later.
Yep. Perfect. That's perfect. I
Yeah.
love the idea of pen, so you can't mess with it.
Yep.
I love the idea of the index of the 3x5. I tell everybody to carry index cards with them everywhere they go because they're unobtrusive, and you can slip them in the back of your jeans, and in your blazer pocket, in your wallet, whatever. And I just love the pshaw. Didn't work. No, beep, nope, because this falling in love with everything is a disaster when it comes to creativity. Right?
Yep.
An absolute disaster. So let's move on and talk about these two wonderful instruction books that you've got, How to Make a Graphic Memoir. These are Start Yours Now, and then The Many Faces of You. The How to Make a Graphic Memoir and and the number 2, 1 and 2 are both available now, or is the second one about to come out?
The second one is about to come out, hopefully early June. I just turned the pages in a week ago. So.
Great. And so the exciting thing here is that you said, wait, I understand this medium. I can help people do this. And that's a different kind of confidence, a different kind of gift too. But you teach memoir, but you're also giving this instruction. Now, the first one is 24 pages long. I know because I've got it and I love it. And it's a zine. You can get it in a minute, literally in a minute. And we're going to show people how to get that. And what about the second? Is it also short and I can have it in a second?
Yep, the same. When it's ready to go, there'll be printed copies that you can order to have one sent to you, or PDF copies that you, like you said, you can download in a minute. It's not ready yet, the second one, but it should be in June from the same source.
Yeah. So why did you need a second volume?
Oh, well, the truth is I'm aiming for more than 2. My initial idea was to write a book about how to make graphic memoir. And honestly, I got kind of sad because I thought I don't really want to spend the next X number of years doing a book about how to make graphic memoir, because books are a big project, right?
Yep.
And I really, really want to do this other book about the joys in my current life from my childhood stories. And then working with other people and the way things often work in comics, where these zines are very popular, they're inexpensive, they're accessible. I thought, well, heck, I had an outline for the book. Why don't I just do a chapter at a time and put them out into the world as these zines? And that gives me the satisfaction of getting things out into the world. My students help me. I say to them, okay, what should I do next? And they say, oh, we need this one. And so I'll work on the next one. And eventually, when I'm done, I think I have about 8 in my head, we will probably collect these into one volume. But if I do 2 a year, while I'm making these other projects, I'll feel like I'm helping, and I'll be satisfied. My creative aspect doing these will be satisfied, and it won't overwhelm me from other projects.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, oops, I want to just show we're jumping over the slides are jumping around. So your classes are at the Sequential Artists Workshop. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we're going to take some questions from everybody listening in.
Yep. So if you go to this website that you see here, also you can come to my website, elizabethtrembley.com. I
Put that up
teach,
here. Yeah, they're here.
there you
Yep.
go. Yep, thanks. Every winter, so usually starting towards the end of January, for 12 weeks, I do a graphic memoir intensive class. It's very limited. I think there's 15 or 16 students right now. We're just about to finish. We're in our last 2 weeks. And we do a lot of reading of graphic memoir. We write an 8-page zine. They draft an 8-page zine every week. That's a piece of memoir. They'll tell you it's a lot of work, and they dig in, and we do really good stuff. So I will be doing that again. I think I plan to, anyways, in early 2025. That seems far away, but it's not. And then there's also an ongoing graphic memoir and graphic medicine group through SAW. I hang out there, talk to people. We talk about all kinds of things there. It's a bunch of people who are working on graphic memoirs, helping each other out. So that's something that you can join at any time. And then I often teach a 4-week class on story structure in the fall. And we haven't
Great.
scheduled that yet, but I think that might be coming as well. And then, of course, as you mentioned, I coach individual clients in small groups and things like that.
That's wonderful. That's so helpful. And we're going to take questions in a second. I wanted to remind people that here at the Memoir Project, we've got lots and lots of classes these days. This systems page is something we worked on recently. While we let Beth take a breath here, I'm just going to bring you up to date on all the things we do. If you want to work with me working on memoir, we've got classes here on getting started writing memoir. And if you want to write and publish a book-length memoir, we've got a nice list of classes that you can take. And if you want to live the whole writing life, you can learn to write op-eds, learn to write the personal essay, take the master class, learn to write a book-length piece of memoir. And we now have lots and lots of editors that you can work with here at the Memoir Project. And of course, we've got the QWERTY podcast, which I love doing and is up to, I think, episode 120, working, interviewing great living writers who are well published, who answer my questions about what the things that you want to know. So those are some of the things we're doing here. We just turned this into an interactive page on the website. It should be up this week so that all those little red links will actually go to the class page for all of those classes. That took us a while, but oops. And let's see if I can get the images back. No, they're just, it's being difficult. Let's see, why is it sharing like that? I don't know. I'll just stop that sharing for a second and get back to the big graphic. There we go. And so let's take some questions, Beth, and see what we've got.
Sure.
I've got a bunch here from people, which is exciting. So Sally asks, do you find that a picture really can be worth 1,000 words in graphic memoir?
Yes. Next.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I love that idea of that teapot, right? I get it. The tea kettle. I get it totally. And there are so many things that evoke such strong reactions, but I find it fascinating that you made that point about how outside of this country, there's a much stronger, longer tradition of graphic literature. And so one image worth 1,000 words. I've also seen memoir that isn't in cartoon form. I've worked with some people using medical records, people using all kinds of ephemera and memorabilia. That's also getting quite popular. But you specialize in the comic version. Is that correct?
Yes, that's how I make it myself. But
Hmm.
I would call those other things, absolutely, I would call them graphic memoir. I
Yeah.
think if they rely a lot on juxtaposing words and images or images and images. If you're familiar with Linda Barry's work, and
Yes.
folks, if you're not, that would be great work to look at. Particularly, she's got a book called What It Is that will blow your mind. That is a combination of handwriting, comics and cartoons, collaged three-dimensional objects that she collages in using a copier, all kinds of things. I think that too would be graphic memoir. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. So Haley has a question. Working on a memoir that will be illustrated with artwork created by me and my abuser written about in the book. We are both artists. but it will not be comics. Do you have any advice for writers who want to include illustrations, art, but not in the comic format? So we touched on that a minute ago. This is a fascinating thing. And Haley, I want you to definitely do this book. But
Hmm.
what do you think, Beth, in terms of advice, in terms of including illustrations, art, not in the comic format? So how would you advise utilizing those various kinds of graphic material?
Absolutely. And so glad that people are doing that. I think that the thing to ask yourself as you go forth is, are the words just duplicating what's in the image? Uh,
Ah,
right? I think that
yeah.
the richness is going to come from the juxtaposition. In other words, even though the words are self-contained and make perfect sense, and the piece of art, same, when they're together on the page, there's going to be a resonance that's going to cause a vibration and a richness to both that would not have been there in either or. There's a fairly new book out by a woman named Erin Williams called What's Wrong? And it's a piece of graphic medicine. So that means it's about, well, that's just what it sounds like, healthcare, and all the things that are involved in that. And this is particularly about the American health system and women and marginalized populations. But what Erin does is almost entirely what you've just described, a lot prose with illustrations. And so I mention that because it might be a really interesting model for Haley to look at if she hasn't already.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Jeannie says, since I had read Look Again, I really wanted to see her pages when Beth was setting up the story earlier today. That is the strength of graphic memoir, I think. My question is, how do you decide what the words will show and the drawings will say? Yeah, I think it's fascinating that we're not calling this illustrated memoir. This is not an illustration of the words.
Right.
It's a juxtaposition, as you said. So how do you decide what the words will show and the drawings will say? I love the way she wrote that too.
Yeah. That is, I think, very much up to each creator,
Mm,
in the same way that you would decide, make those kinds of decisions in prose. And for me, I try things out a lot of different ways. I like to think a lot about film, and television. I love television. I'm just an unabashed fan of good quality TV. And so it's not the same. How it works with time and space is very, very different from comics, but you can learn a lot. And my general thought is that if I can immerse a reader in a scene, in a moment that's important for some reason, there's going to be a revelation or, some other reason that I need seen as opposed to summary, I'm probably going to try to draw that because I think the reader's going to immerse more completely as it unfolds in front of them in drawings.
mm.
Now, in memoir, if I think there's something in that summary, I call it summary, or that second story, right? That meaning making voice, that is often boxed out, I would say, or the words are across the top or somehow separated out so that it's clear that that is me, the author, me now, I like to call it, talking to you, my reader. It is not part of the scene that's playing out in front of me. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. If it's in scene, for sure, I'm going to put it in pictures, or at least that's how I'm going to draft it, and then I'll decide. And if it's me making meaning of the thing or talking about the story from the past, I'm going to start with it in words.
Great.
Again,
Wonderful distinction. Sandy asks, are most of the graphic memoirs self-published? And I think you should tell Sandy about Street Noise, the indie publisher that does this gorgeous work. And I've not seen, I've seen lots of mainstream publishing graphic memoir. So talk to us a little bit about your publisher, if you would, please, Beth.
yeah, there's just what you said. There's a lot of mainstream publishing of graphic memoir. There are also loads of people who independently publish their graphic memoirs for a variety of reasons. And there are independent small presses that do a lot of different things, but a lot of, I find that a lot of independent small presses are kind of a niche in the way that they have a particular sort of message they want to get out, or a particular clientele they want to work with. And I chose to go with a small independent press called Street Noise. And I urge you all to check them out. If you Google it, it'll come right up. Because what that publisher is doing, I think their motto is books for people who give a damn. And they work entirely in non-fiction graphic novels, novels, the word for book length comics. And so from marginalized voices. And so I knew that this was a place where my book was going to find a home. And even though very, very small staff there, it was going to be, a group that was going to be dedicated to getting my book out and helping it find the right people. Most recently, Street Noise is expanding. It has it has more books coming out every year, and to astonishing level of praise. I'm so proud to be part of that book list, and so proud of my publisher as she has gone on to work with other folks. Just so many of her books are getting great press, amazing awards, kind of, internationally. Really, really, really interesting things to look at. So if you're like thinking you want to look at some graphic memoir, maybe some edgier graphic memoir, and you don't know where to start, a great place to start would be looking at what Street Noise has published.
I love them. I'm looking at them. I immediately, of course, Googled it on my phone, and I'm just like, oh,
Good.
look at this. Look at this. Oh my goodness, look at this.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody should go look when we get off of here. But that is a great suggestion.
Super
So
eclectic.
Margie asks, photos as graphic memoir. I am writing about my experiences with a certain kind of hawk, and I'm using photos. But my concern is, can I use these photos, or will my memoir be too expensive to publish?
Really good question. So first of all, photo comics is a thing. And Street Noise, in fact, has one. I believe it's called The Last Gay Man on Earth. And I cannot remember the author, so I apologize for
Wait, I
that.
just saw it here. Hold on, once I was scrolling through. I'll find it. You keep talking.
Okay, that is entirely photo comics. So, Margie, that's something, and there's others, of course, out there, but photo comics, that would be the phrase you would want to search to see what people are doing out there for that kind of thing. You've taken the pictures, so you own the images, so that's good news. And then, the cost of self-publishing, if you're talking about that, color costs more than black and white. It does. Remarkably, not as much as you would think. So it's worth investigating. Often I find that the size is what dictates the cost more than color versus black and white. There's some excellent publishing, online printers. Just get on there and just run a few specs. Like, okay, what if my book was 6x9 and 200 pages? What would it cost to print it? You can find those things out right online. What if I did it 9x12, what it would cost, and you'll learn a lot that way about how that stuff works.
So the name of the author of The Last Gay Man on Earth is Yip Dreisen, and it's YPE, and then the last name is DRIESSEN. But definitely go and have a look at Street Noise. They've got a really great lineup of books here. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
So Brent asks, I want to write a memoir-driven illustrated how-to book. Do you know of any examples of this type of format I could read? Well, first of all, you should definitely go to Street Noise, because I'm seeing an astonishing array of books, and I'm not going to search for how-tos right this second, but wow, yeah. What do you think? How-to?
How-to based on a memoir. Is that what?
Yeah, so a hybrid self-help kind of memoir, perhaps. How to based on memoir can be anything from including recipes to here's how I got over being anxious, and have some steps in the back, right?
Right. Well, in terms of comics, what that makes me think of is, oh boy, I'm terrible at this. There's a wonderful book about cooking out there. It's salt, acid.
Oh, salt, fat, heat. Yeah, salt, fat, acid, heat.
Thank you, that one. That would be an interesting one to look at. I'm sorry. That would be an interesting one to look at, because it is it's a how-to about cooking. I think there's prose involved, but also comics. There's a variety of memoirs out there. Oh, and I cannot remember any titles right now, but that are around cooking. And the questioner may not be asking specifically about cooking, but that's
Hmm.
what I'd go looking for the
Yep.
form and how folks are saying, I grew up in this household. Maybe it's an immigrant household where, cooking was a huge part of bringing the culture into the United States and all the different things that it meant. And then the how-to is there about recipes, or, maybe it's about woodworking with someone, or like you said, overcoming anxiety. I think the key is that the how-to, as long as it's illustrating something, you don't lose that meaning making aspect of the memoir.
Yes.
I mean, that's so crucial. It's the heart of memoir, I think. And so I think being able to alternate back and forth, between how-to explainer comics, that's called. It's another
Hmm.
phrase, explainer comics.
I
If
love the phrase.
Yeah, and if you Google that phrase, explainer comics, you'll get a sense of how people do those. And then again, there's you can find lots of different models and learn how to scaffold yourself off of what other people are doing. I'm a firm believer in scaffolding, not
Yeah.
copying, but studying what people are doing, what works, how can I make that work for me?
Scaffolding. That's my new favorite word. Thank you
Yeah,
for that,
I
Beth.
tell you.
So Sandy asks, can you draw the panels like a dummy draft and send it to publishers, or does it have to be digital?
Really good question. Ultimately, when you send it to publishers, I think probably almost everyone on spec, when you're first sort of querying anyways, they're gonna want to see digital stuff.
Hmm.
So you can be drawing it on paper. And it's really quite easy, even with your phone nowadays, to scan. Just you don't need an expensive scanner. Go out in a nice bright sunlight, make sure you're not casting a shadow, and scan your pages, and you can get a PDF together quite easily that way to share some of your art.
Yeah. Perfect.
If you have an agent, listen to what they tell you. If not, there's plenty of comics publishers out there who do not require agents,
Oh,
obviously, and I'm sure you teach this. Look and see what they tell you they want, then do exactly what they tell you. Right?
exactly what they tell you. If they say they want
Exactly.
5 pages, do not send them 8. If they say they want
That's
60 pages, do not send them 61. Do
right.
exactly what they tell you. Yeah,
Right.
that's great. And of course, you
And
could just zap it off your phone. That's perfect.
yeah.
Yeah, good. Wendy asks, I've read a wonderful memoir that is a collage of drawings, photos, clippings. Any thoughts? Yeah, I think we've
Yeah.
covered that.
Do
Yes,
it.
yes,
Roz
yes, yes.
Chast works that way. If you look at Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant?
Oh,
That's Roz Chast's memoir about her aging parents. And it combines comics, prose, photographs, reproductions of documents. Again, Linda Berry works that way. I'm sure, I know there are others. I'm just not thinking on them right off the bat.
yeah,
But
Roz
yes,
Chast, Chast, and
right.
that book made me sob.
Oh,
So
what a
it's
beautiful book.
yeah, it's not that these are just ha ha laugh along funny either. The inclusion of her work with the messaging of walking her parents home. Whew, yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. So can you draw pictures from photos? Asks Mary Jane.
Okay, so in the famous graphic novel Fun Home, which many people have heard of, if not from the musical, there's the graphic novel. Famously, Alison Bechdel says, and I imagine it's true, that she posed herself as virtually every person in every panel in that book, took photographs and drew from those photographs. All of us use reference photographs, I think, in different ways and to different levels. I definitely use them. I have so many pictures of myself in weird positions or making weird faces in my phone's camera roll, Uh, and then yes, maybe you're the only person you have in your house, so you are posing to be all the people.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. You can use photographs, photo references for flowers, for landscapes, all of it.
great.
Yep.
So we've got a couple more questions here. I know we're getting up against the time, but Marcella asks, I'm an illustrator and I've been writing a memoir where gardening is a big component. I'm
Mm.
wondering about sequencing. Would it be weird or jarring if the first act was written, the second act was illustrated, and the third act was written?
Oh, that go for it.
Yeah.
Totally go for it. I think in particular, there's at least one memoir that I know of. Oh, I can't remember the title. So let me think a minute or let me Google a minute and I'll probably find it. But where two people wrote it, a brother and a sister, and they were talking about their third sibling. And so the woman wrote it in prose, and the brother, who's a comics artist, made comics, and they alternated back and forth. Now,
Wow.
I'm going to find it.
Yes. You find
Yeah.
it while I thank Perrine for giving us The Last Gay Man on Earth, giving us the specifics on that. Yeah, we got that one, but thank you, Perrine. That's incredibly kind of you.
Yeah.
And Jeannie says, Myra Jacobs, good talk. Very limited drawing, but effective.
Thank
Very
you.
nice.
Yes. Very
Yep, that's
excellent book. The cool thing about that book, Good Talk, is that what the author does is actually just use like cutouts. Like she drew herself once and her son once and her husband once, and then she almost the pages are put together so that it looks like they're collaged on top. And so there isn't a lot of body language or even facial expression. It really rides on the page constructions and the words that are said. As the title indicates, Good Talk, it's a book of conversations that she had with her son, largely about race. And it's, oh my goodness, it's just one not to be missed.
oh, that's
Both,
lovely. Thank you
yeah,
for
for
that
its,
recommendation, both
yeah,
of you.
thanks, Jeannie,
And
yeah.
we'll wrap it up with Elizabeth's question. If you include documents, are they excluded from copyright when registering it with the government? Ooh, I don't
I
know.
have
I don't give legal advice, so don't
no
give legal
idea.
advice here, Beth. We don't have any idea. You'll have to ask an intellectual property lawyer for that,
Yep,
Elizabeth.
yep,
But thank
agree.
you. And thank you, Beth. This has been perfect. And I'm so grateful to you bringing this knowledge, this expertise along to all of these very eager listeners. So thank you.
Yes, the book that I was referencing a second ago is called The Ride Together, a brother and sister's memoir of autism in the family,
Ah,
by Paul
ah,
Karasik and Judy Karasik, who are brother and sister of the third sibling. And that's the one that alternates between prose and comics. Again, two
perfect.
authors, but your was it Marcella who was asking that
Yes.
question? Could get a sense of how that works.
Yes, absolutely. So everybody, please give a shout out to Beth saying thank you. I'd appreciate it so much if you would. And there in the comments, just give her a thank you. Thank you, Beth. This has been wonderful. For all
Mm-hmm.
of you, there is a access to this on YouTube, and you will be getting your recording tomorrow. But again, go have a look at Beth. I'm going to show you once again where to get in touch with her. Let's see if we can get the slides to cooperate. You know, not always. Sometimes they just go black, and I should be able to get it back. There we go. And there, sometimes, I don't know why it doesn't like to go backwards. Here we go. If you want to go to sawcomics.org to learn.sawcomics.org for the classes. And here is her website to reach her and to pick up these two fabulous books on how to do this. Thank you, Beth. We'll be back in touch. I'm so grateful to you and your work and for all your knowledge. It was a joy having you today.
Thank you. It was a joy to be here. And thanks to everyone who was able to attend and who listens in the future. I
Yeah.
loved it. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.